that you would spend some time on a Saturday afternoon to come out and to discuss issues with me and to talk to me and learn more about why I'm running for Congress. I can sum up in a very simple paragraph why I'm running for the United States Congress. We stand on the precipice of being the first generation to leave to our kids a less prosperous nation than the one we inherited. Now think about that for a second. We stand on the precipice of being the first generation to hand to our children a less prosperous nation. And I am not okay with that. And I know you're not okay with that. For the last 5 years, I've served in the legislature, and it's been a fantastic time. I actually resigned just in January so that I could focus full-time on my attention on running for Congress, coming out, meeting folks like you. We have meetings like this every single night, every day of the week. We are working extremely hard. As many of you know, I think many of you probably received a personal phone call from me inviting you here. As a matter of fact, how many here did I personally call? Excellent, excellent. That is how hard we're working. You know, I want to tell you a little bit, I want to take you back because I know many of you, and there's others that I'm meeting for the first time today. I want to take you back a little bit prior to me being in the legislature to give you just a little bit of an idea of who I am. To tell you how today's going to go, I'm going to give you a little bit of background on who I am, what I've done in the legislature, why I'm running for Congress, and then the most important part, I want to take your questions. And I want to just have a dialogue with you. I want to talk with you. I want everyone here, when you leave today, to have your questions answered. And I want you to know something up front. I'm going to be honest with you. If we disagree, that's fine. Good people can disagree. But I want you to know that the answers you get from me come from my gut and come from the principles that I believe in, the constitutionally limited government, the principles that our founding fathers set up in this country. 6 years ago, I was very apolitical. I would never have been caught dead in a meeting like this, to be honest with you. I was working as a police officer. That's what I've done my entire adult life. I've been a SWAT team commander. I've been a canine officer. In fact, I was your city's. Does anyone here not live in South Jordan? Okay, a few of you. Okay. For the most part, you live in South Jordan. I was your city's first canine officer here in South Jordan City. I was also the founder of the South Jordan SWAT team. Me and a couple other guys were the founding members of the South Jordan SWAT team. This is home for me. This is where I work the streets and patrol. I also taught many of your children DARE in elementary schools. It was a fantastic experience. In fact, I called one home not too long ago, this last week as I was making phone calls, I called one home, and a young man, 21 years old, he answered, and I introduced myself. I asked for his parents, they weren't home, and he said, "Were you a DARE officer at Welby Elementary?" I said, "Yeah." He says, "You were my DARE officer." I'm like, "Wow, you made me feel old." I mean, he was 21 years old, and I said, "What are you doing with your life?" And he says, "No, he's 22. He said, "What are you doing with your life?" And he said, "Well, I'm interviewing with Goldman Sachs next week. He's going to be in the financial industry." Wow, it made me feel old because I was teaching him when he was in 5th grade. I was going along working hard, just working overtime to make ends meet, just to put food on the table. I have been a blue-collar, hard-working, middle-class Utah my entire life. That's who I am. It's what I chose. But at the time, I was working extra so my wife could stay home with our small kids. We have 3 small kids, and that was important to us. There was a series of events that came together that led me into politics. One of them was that as a police officer, I had experience dealing with child predators. I was a detective for a very short period of time and saw firsthand the horrific ramifications of child predators. And I got tired of seeing people go to prison for brutal child sex offenses just to get out in 3 years or so and do it again. And so one of the things I wanted to change was our child predator laws. But it wasn't enough to get me into politics. One day, out of the blue, I got a postcard in the mail. It was a postcard from a parental rights group. And this parental rights group, it's one of those things you just read and throw away. But I I actually sat down and I did something that would change my life forever. I called the number on the postcard. And I called them and I said, I agree with what you're saying because I'm a strong parental rights advocate. I believe the parents should have the rights to raise their children how you see fit. I'm a strong believer that the government should take a far, far back seat when it comes to parental rights and raising your children. So I called them up and said, do you have a yard sign I can put in my yard? I like what you're saying. They said, well, no, we don't have a yard sign, but you can help us another way. And I said, well, how? And they said, you can go to your caucus meeting and run as a delegate. Now, I have to tell you, this was 6 years ago, and it's the first time in my entire adult life that I had ever heard those two words. I had no idea what a caucus was or a delegate was. And I said, well, what is that? And they said, well, it's very simple. You go to your neighbor's house or to a school, and you run, it's your friends and neighbors, and you run as a delegate. If you are elected as a delegate, you get to pick who the Republican is on the ballot for November. Boy, it was like the scales fell off my eyes because I did not realize that I had been missing 2/3 of the entire election process in this state. I voted every November, and I thought I was doing my civic duty. And so I told her, hey, I can run as a delegate, I can do that. And she said, well, where do you live? I said, I live in Harriman. Boy, she gets all perky. She's like, have you ever thought of running for the legislature? I said, lady, you just explained to me what a delegate was. No, I've never thought of running for the legislature. And she says, well, would you? I said, no. No, I called for a yard sign. And now she's trying to get me to run for the legislature. Well, she said, will you at least meet with me? And I said, why? She said, because your legislator is the most liberal Republican in the state of Utah. He votes for tax increases all the time. He's always, and that's getting me, no, don't like that. And he's always voting for bigger government, more regulation, and he just voted against what would have been the biggest tax cut in the history of the state of Utah. So now she's got me intrigued, and I'm thinking, y'all, I'll meet you for breakfast. So I hang up the phone, and I turn to my wife, Sherry, and I said, Sherry, I think she wants me to run for the legislature. And my wife says, well, what does that mean? I said, I don't know. And 2 weeks later, I went and met with this lady. And I tell you, she was a good saleswoman. She was really good. She said, I've been researching you. You're great. I said, lady, you're desperate. You got the wrong guy. Well, we decided, I told her, I said, fine, I'll put my name on the ballot out of protest of the guy that's in there. But I'm not really going to run, okay? And so she said, fine enough. The filing deadline came. I went down to the Salt Lake County Clerk's office. I paid my $15.80. I don't know what it cost. Like $16 is all it cost. I had no idea. And I felt pretty cool. I was a candidate on the ballot. And I went home and I forgot about it. Because to be completely honest with you, look, I had no money. I mean, I was a law enforcement officer. I had no political experience. I never knew another elected official. Politicians were just people that I saw on TV who were not to be trusted. Okay? That's who they were to me. But the phone started ringing. And people would say, who are you? I said, I'm just a cop from Harriman. They said, well, why are you running for office? And I'd say, well, I'm not really running. And they say, well, what's your platform? I said, I don't have a platform. I'm not really running. I just put my name out there and out of protest of the status quo. They said, well, what do you believe? And I said, that I can tell you. I said, pull up a chair. And I remember this day what I told people. I said, I believe in the goodness of America. I believe that this is the greatest country that has ever existed on the face of the earth. I believe that our founding fathers were chosen men, raised up at that time to draft the Constitution, and I believe the Constitution was divinely inspired. I believe that anyone in this country, any one of you, can succeed if government will just get out of the way. If government will stop taxing us out of existence, stop regulating us out of existence, I believe that anyone in this country can live the American dream. I said, I am unapologetically pro-life. I am a staunch defender of the right to bear arms, and I believe in the Bill of Rights. And people said, we want to help you get elected. And so for the next 2 weeks, my wife and I spent our time on our knees praying and thinking about this, and we decided, yes, we're in. We're going to run for the legislature. And I got to tell you, I didn't know how to run for the legislature, but the one thing that my parents instilled in me was how to work hard. I was raised in a military family. My father served in the 82nd Airborne Division, and we have five boys in our family. And of the 5 boys, 3 of them are career military, the career Army. The other 2 of us are career law enforcement. We were raised from a very young age to have a deep respect and a deep love for God, family, and country. We were also taught to work and work hard. And so when it was time to get to work, I went and I walked my entire district. Shirley Hanasek is here, and I remember her from the very, very first time I was running for office, knocking on her door and introducing myself. I walked and I knocked and I talked to people. I met people in meetings just like this. I sat down with them in their homes. I called them on the phone just like I did you this week. And I brought my message to them. And in November of 2006, the most unlikely person in the world was elected to the legislature. And I have to tell you, it was the second most humbling experience of my entire life. The biggest, most humbling experience I've ever had was the day that my first child was in my arms and the doctor said it's time to go home. I said, wait, do I get to take a nurse with me? I mean, you know, you have this little baby, you don't have to be a father. Well, I got to tell you, being elected to the legislature, I went from being a street cop, just a flatfoot on the street, to representing 70,000 people. I didn't know how to be a representative. It was a very humbling experience. But I put myself to work. I was humble enough to learn, and I studied. And over the last 5 years, I've been involved in really some of the most significant pieces of legislation that we've passed here in the state. I want to just highlight 3 of the things I've been involved in. I told you that child predators was something that I was passionate about, cracking down on them. So my first term in office, I passed what is called the Jessica Lunsford Act, Jessica's Law. It moved Utah from being the weakest in the nation when it came to child predators and the penalties against child predators to being #1 in the country. We went from a 3 years in prison penalty for child rape and some brutal sex crimes against children to a minimum mandatory sentence of 25 years to life on a first offense and life with no possibility of parole on a second offense. That was my first term. I stayed in office and I ran again because there were things that were coming down that were very, very hard. The budget was collapsing, the budget was decreasing, the economy was collapsing, and there was a lot of talk about raising taxes. Now, I'm one who believes that tax increases, let me just say this, I've never voted for one. I made a commitment never to vote for a tax increase, and I've kept that commitment. And I'll tell you why. Because government has enough money, but what they lack are the priorities to put that money where it needs to go first and make the tough decisions to cut what needs to be cut. I was involved in a piece of legislation. I was the first legislator in the entire country to pass a constitutional amendment pushing back against the labor unions who were trying to take away your right to a secret ballot. You may or may not remember this fight, but a couple years back, President Obama had promised some of the big labor unions, and Dirk remembers this well. You were on Capitol Hill fighting right there with me, because Dirk, you own an electric company. That's right. And there was a huge push in Washington, D.C. to pass what was called card check. And what card check would have done is it would have done away with all of the voting when it came to unionizing your companies and a company. It would have allowed the unions to come in and collect petition signatures. And if 50% of your employees sign it, you're union. And the employees were saying, we don't want this. Because what happens is they'll come up and say, hey, Dirk, look, Aaron and Eddie and all your buddies over here, they signed it. Come on, you want to be buddies with them? Come on, you're going to be the only guy that's going to sign this? And is Dirk going to sign it? Well, Dirk's going to sign it. And then he doesn't get to vote, his real conscience. Well, I was the first legislator in the nation to pass a constitutional amendment that said,